Coming to get you, Bobber.
The Witches is a 2020 family horror directed by Robert Zemeckis, and it stars Anne Hathaway, Octavia Spencer and Stanley Tucci. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I've got a special guest on my channel today. We've got Jack from Spooky Kids TV,
Hi.
aka my son, and we're going to do a spoiler review for The Witches. So if you haven't seen it yet, please don't watch this review yet, but once you've seen it, come back, check out the review. Based on Roald Dahl's 1983 classic book The Witches, the story tells the scary, funny and imaginative tale of a 7-year-old boy who has a run-in with some real witches. I read the book back in school, and that was like 30 odd years ago now, so I don't actually remember reading the book. I remember reading it at the time, but when I was watching the 1990 movie and then watching the 2020 movie, I couldn't really tell you overall which one was closer to the book because I just can't remember. I'll quickly talk about the acting because I think the acting in this movie was overall a lot better than the acting in the 1990 adaptation. I will talk about that quite a bit because we have to compare them. But the acting in this was great. Obviously Octavia Spencer was great as grandma, and the grandkid, the boy, he was also great as well. I think those were the two strongest in this film, whereas in the 1990 adaptation, the grandma and Luke, he was called Luke in that one, I think they were the weakest parts of the film. I think that maybe the acting wasn't as good. But what do you think? Do you think the acting was better in the remake or the reimagining or the 1990 movie?
The remake.
Yeah, I think the remake had more of a three-dimensional characters with those ones. When it comes to Stanley Tucci, for example, as the hotel manager, comparing him to Rowan Atkinson in the 1991, there's not much to compare because both of them were good and both of them were similar. I know that Rowan Atkinson's a really funny actor, but he wasn't terribly funny in the 1990 movie, so I think that Stanley Tucci was a good replacement. The hard part is the Grand High Witch. We've got Anne Hathaway, who's a really good actress, and she plays a really good Grand High Witch. Jack thinks she was really scary, don't you? Very scary. But when it comes to Angelica Houston, I think she was equally as scary because she didn't rely on any CGI. And I think her version of the witch was scarier. Maybe it's because I was a kid when I first watched it, but when you go back to Anne Hathaway in this film, she was really good as the Grand High Witch, but I think what let it down was the CGI, which I'll go into now. I think the CGI was terrible in this film. I don't think Jack noticed the CGI was that bad, but I think the CGI was terrible. I don't know if it was a rush job or they didn't have a lot of money, but you can tell which parts were totally CGI, especially the three fingers on the witches. You know, they were doing this, and you can clearly see like haze there where the green screen or the green glove was going to be. So I think the CGI was what let the Grand High Witch's performance down, but I think also the CGI let the movie down a little bit. When we compare the 1990 adaptation to the 2020, there was a lot missing from this one that I'm not sure was supposed to be in the movies to begin with based on the book, but there was a scene at the start of the 1990 movie where the grandma's telling the story about her friend who was sucked into a painting, and that was how the Grand High Witch killed that girl. But then on this one, it wasn't the painting this time, it was she turned into a chicken. I thought that was a little bit silly, more child friendly I would say, because this is a more child friendly movie. The 1990 adaptation was dark for its time anyway, but I would much prefer to see the little girl disappearing in the painting after a while. I think that's more haunting. The chicken one was quite funny, but not as effective as a little girl disappearing in a painting in front of her eyes. The pram scene was missing as well. I don't know if you guys call it a pram, like the buggy that you push babies in the US. There was a pram scene in the 1990 adaptation where one of the witches pushes a pram down the cliff and little Luke has to go and grab it. I think that was very scary, very haunting. That was the part where the witches were chasing him inside and out. So I think when he goes outside onto the cliff side, when the witches are coming out in the open to get him, I think that was really scary. Something that was really missing from the 2020 adaptation. There was a whole subplot missing. When I say a whole subplot, it's not a massive subplot, but there was a maid in the 1990 adaptation who was seeing the hotel manager, and she goes in and cleans the Grand High Witch's room, and there was a potion there and she thought it was perfume, so she was putting it on, then her neck turns hairy, and then he doesn't like her. So that whole subplot, even though it wasn't massive, was missing from the adaptation, this new adaptation as well. The look of the witches, including the Grand High Witch, I do like the witches in this one. if it had less CGI, I would have liked them more, but I do like the fact they've got 3 fingers. I don't think they had 3 fingers in the book. They definitely didn't have 3 fingers in the 1990 movie, but I do like that. I like their feet as well. They've got this sort of raptor claw on their feet. Well, the Grand High Witch does anyway.
That was a middle finger.
But when it comes to non-CGI, I think the 1990 one just wins it slightly. And I think it's because of those purple eyes, even though it's CGI. But I think it was the purple eyes that stood out for me as a kid, especially when that woman was trying to get looked down from the tree in the original. And you just seen those eyes. I think that was a lot scarier. And then finally, the ending of this one, again, this is a spoiler, the ending of this one was more faithful to the book, but I don't know which one I prefer. I think the ending of this one, they didn't get turned back into humans, whereas the 1990 one, they did get turned back into humans. So they stayed in their mouse form in this movie, just like the book. So I liked that they were faithful to the book, and I also like the fact that they turned the story on its head, because after, or the mid-credit scene, we've got the boy, who's now the mouse, telling the kids what the witches were trying to do, and turning it on its head. It's not the witches hunting the kids now, it's now a witch hunt. It was definitely more child friendly. They replaced words like kill to destroy. So instead of I want to kill the kids, and this one is they want to destroy the kids. So it was a lot less dark than the 1990 one. So I think that's what I like about the 1990 one more, that it's more dark, and it was still child friendly at the time, but kids are more sensitive these days. So I think that they're trying to be more sensitive when it comes to showing this movie to kids. But I think you Jack, he found this one scarier than the 1990 one, and I think that's why you like this one better, isn't it?
Yeah, scary movies are better than the ones that aren't that scary.
Although the story was tweaked in this one, whether it be for the better or worse, the structure of this film was almost identical to the structure of the 1990 film. So I think that's where it gets that issue of being called a remake, even though it's not a remake, it's a readaptation. But it's sort of like The Lion King. So you've got The Lion King from 1994 and then The Lion King from last year. They're very identical, and that's why a lot of people didn't like the newest Lion King, because it was too identical to the original. I think some people will have the same issues with the 2020 Witches being too identical structure-wise to the 1990 movie. Overall, I went into this movie thinking it was going to be a complete CGI mess with a bad storyline, everything being bad about it, so I went in with that major negative vibe. But overall, I was pleasantly surprised. It wasn't a great movie. I think it was an okay movie. It didn't live up to the original whatsoever. I don't think it was anywhere near as good as the original, but I still think you would have a fun time watching it with the family. Jack enjoyed it, obviously, didn't you, Jack?
Way better than the original.
He thinks it's way better than the first one. I think that's because of the technology that they use now. But I think the CGI still was a mess. It was really bad. I think that was the worst thing about this film. But overall, I was still pleasantly surprised. If you've seen The Witches from this year, guys, let me know what you thought about it down below. Also, let me know what you like better, the 1990 Witches or this Witches. I prefer the 1990 Witches. Jack prefers
the 2020 Witches.
So leave your comments down below, guys. Let me know which one you prefer. As always, guys, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.